I assume you have heard that Adam and Eve sinned, but you most likely do not know the nature of their sin, so I'm going to tell you. Moses tells us that Satan came to Eve and asked her a question, a leading question, because he wanted her to believe something other than the truth. Keep that in mind. Satan wanted Eve to believe a lie, so he asked her a simple question. Do you want to know things that you don't know right now? And Eve said, sure, I want to know everything. So Satan said, well, God has told you that you must not eat from this tree of the knowledge of good and evil because you will die. But the truth is, if you do what God has told you not to do, you will then know everything that God knows. That's when Eve sinned. She made the mistake of believing God had lied to her. That was her sin. That was what offended God. She called God a liar. Keep that in mind. But keep this in mind also. If you hear the truth of the gospel and you don't believe it, you are doing exactly what Eve did. You are calling God a liar. The unfortunate thing is, Satan deceived Eve by making her believe he had said something he didn't actually say. Here's what Moses tells us about their conversation. Now the serpent was more crafty than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, indeed, has God said you shall not eat from any tree of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, from the fruit of the trees of the garden we may eat. But from the fruit of the tree which is in the middle of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat from it or touch it, lest you die. And the serpent said to the woman, you surely shall not die. For God knows that in the day you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. When the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was desirable to make one wise, she took from its fruit and ate. And she gave also to her husband with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loin coverings. Satan deceived Eve through his use of the Hebrew idiom, knowing good and evil. He expected her to take that idiom literally, and she did. The truth is, knowing good and evil sometimes carries a meaning other than the literal meaning of the words. Its idiomatic meaning is able to procreate. We speak in idioms all the time. For example, a person who bought a lemon may not have bought a piece of fruit. He may have bought a car that is in constant need of repair. And a person who bought the farm may not be planning to plant anything. The truth is, he may already be pushing up daisies. My point is, when Satan spoke to Eve, he was intentionally speaking idiomatically, knowing she would take what he said literally. She thought she was going to get some special insight into things that only God knew. The text plainly says that. She thought that if she did what Satan wanted her to do, she would know things that only God knew. But the truth is, Satan knew that God had already told Eve the truth. He knew that if she ate from that tree, she would immediately begin to die. He also knew that Eve was about 12 years old, and as soon as the aging process set in, she would go through puberty and become sexually mature. That is what the Hebrew idiom, knowing good and evil, means. It means able to procreate. Satan knew that. But he deceived Eve by taking something that was figurative and leading her to believe he meant it literally. Keep that in mind. He is lying to our generation in precisely the same way. I assume you've heard of the literal theory of interpretation. The leaders of the church are telling us the Bible can only be interpreted literally. But that theory makes no sense at all. If you say the Bible can only be understood literally, you are saying God could never say anything that didn't make sense literally. That would mean God could never use idioms, which is obviously not true because God is all-powerful. He is certainly able to express himself in any way that we can. If the literal theory of interpretation were true, the prophets and apostles would never speak in idioms. The truth is they use idiomatic expressions all the time. But take note of what Eve's sin was. Her sin was she chose not to believe God, and by not believing, she called him a liar. That is still the only thing that God holds against us. He is angry that we are sinning because we do not know and believe the truth about him. That's why the only thing that God requires for you to be born again is to believe the truth and confirm your belief by honestly apologizing for having done things you knew were wrong. That's all he requires. He wants you to do precisely the opposite of what Eve did. He wants you to believe him. God's not asking you to do anything to prove yourself worthy of salvation. He's just saying, if you hear the truth, believe the truth, and honestly apologize for the wrongs you have done, you can live forever. That's all there is to it.